Remember the government shutdown of 2013? Good times. We could be heading in that direction again as battles over the budget and raising the nation's debt ceiling loom. April 28th is the expiration date for the continuing resolution that's currently keeping the government funded. Congress is racing to reach an agreement on a spending package before this crucial deadline. So will they make it? Well, joining me now, opinion columnist for The Washington Post, Catherine Rampell, editor-at-large for Reason Magazine, Matt Welch, and MSNBC contributor Jonathan Capehart, who voiced that amazing package that we just saw. Jonathan, excellent job.
Thanks, Joy.
I call you my co-host and chief Washington correspondent for AM Joyce. I'm going to go to you first.
I like it.
Yeah, we love it. No, so what are the issues that are dividing the Republican-controlled Congress over raising the debt ceiling, or is it just the idea of raising the debt ceiling?
It's really the idea of raising the debt ceiling. The one thing to keep in mind here, Joy, is that Freedom Caucus that helped do in the American Health Care Act, well, they are the very people who were dead set against raising the debt ceiling in 2011, the same people who are all about shutting down the government back in, I think it was 2013, and who are poised to do the same thing again. And here's the key thing to keep in mind. One of the members of the House Freedom Caucus is now the director of the Office of Management and Budget. Yep. The person who's in charge of shepherding the budget through, and he is dead set, he has been on record as being dead set against raising the debt ceiling. So what you have within the Trump administration is an OMB director who's on record as saying we don't need to raise the debt ceiling unless we get something for it, and a Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, who is on record, as we showed in the package, as saying without question the debt ceiling must be raised. Yeah,
and you're talking about Mr. Mulvaney, the Office of Management and Budget Director. And this is what you wrote about him in your op-ed on this very topic. You said that Senator Patrick Leahy was actually concerned about Mulvaney's nomination. Back in February 16th, he wrote, "I'm equally concerned with Mr. Mulvaney's casual attitude toward the prospect of the U.S. defaulting on its debts during his tenure in the House. He voted against increasing the debt limit 4 times, calling the potential for U.S. default a fabricated crisis. And this does not comport with reality." Catherine Rampell, during that package that we were playing during the part when Steve Mnuchin said we've spent the money, everybody understands we have to raise the debt ceiling, you kind of laughed because you're like, not everybody agrees with that at all.
No,
including him.
The president doesn't agree with this. President Trump calls himself the king of debt. Remember, a large part of his being able to keep his company, his organization alive was negotiating down his debt obligations.
Or just not paying it.
Well, but that was part of it. Right. I mean, the negotiation was, I'm just not going to pay it. Yeah. And even during the campaign, he repeatedly said, as you may recall, something to the effect of, oh, well, you know, if the economy goes south, I know we can make a deal on our debt. And the financial press understandably freaked out. So you have Trump not completely understanding the fact that you cannot negotiate down our debt payments without sparking a worldwide financial crisis. You have Mulvaney sort of agreeing with him on all of this, you know, being very cavalier at the very least about defaulting on our debt payments. I would say that there has never been a time when I have been more relieved to have Goldman Sachs alumni in the White House.
Right? There are a lot of them.
There are the grown-ups here.
And it's interesting, Matt, because, yeah, when Donald Trump had huge debts, he could negotiate with the bank to keep MAR-A-LAGO by turning it into a private club, and that's what he did. You can't do that with the national debt. Why are there so many people, including in the Freedom Caucus, who think you can? Or you can just
I kind of dispute that as a notion, right? I think the interest in both brinksmanship and in fiscal conservatism generally in the Republican Party is inversely proportional to the amount of power that they hold, which in English is when they don't have power, they are the biggest fiscal conservatives you'll ever see, and we have to attach conditions to the debt ceiling, and we have to reform entitlements. Suddenly that all went away in November 2014. Why? Because Republicans took the Senate. And so they really waved the magic wand and said, we won't have to talk about the debt ceiling until 2017 because we don't want that as an issue anymore. So they are not motivated. Mick Mulvaney was sent by Trump to crack the Freedom Caucus's heads during the health care negotiations. So they love that he's unsuccessfully, but there's not enough Freedom Caucus members. We're talking about maybe 3 dozen people here, and they're not motivated here. So the senators, you know, they say that Trump's budget is a non-starter here anyway. So I think we're just going to see another kind of cromnibus, you know, last-minute must-pass thing, support the troops, and it'll happen.
I'm not convinced that the Democrats are going to be adults in this situation. investigation.
Well, they're the ones now threatening brinksmanship, because you do have, Jonathan, some threats from Democrats to say that they will actually be the ones to do some brinksmanship over things like cutting Planned Parenthood, and that they may be the ones to try to go to the wire.
But let's keep two things separate here. Brinksmanship over Planned Parenthood and other things, that's about the continuing resolution that expires on April 28th and is separate and apart from the debt ceiling. And when House Minority Leader, who you interviewed on the show yesterday, when she had a meeting with opinion writers on Monday, I asked her the question, what about the debt ceiling? What's your strategy? And she said that a letter it was being signed by the Democratic caucus that will be going to Speaker Ryan, telling him that they want a clean debt ceiling bill, meaning a bill with no conditions, no attachments, nothing, a bill that raises the debt ceiling. Otherwise, they're not playing ball.
Yeah, and John McCain, let's listen to what John McCain has had to say as well. John McCain has said that he told CNN on Wednesday, if there's only one option, I will not vote for a CR, continuing resolution, no matter what the consequences, because passing a CR destroys the ability of the military to defend this nation, puts the lives of men and women in the military at risk. So he's also playing some brinksmanship too, McCain, on the Senate side.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with the debt ceiling, with the budget as well, is that these are always must-pass bills, which means that they get a lot of annoying riders attached to them, whether it's defunding Planned Parenthood or you know, the funding for the Mexican wall, et cetera. And so you always have this hostage crisis where people say, you know, the minority says we want a clean bill, or the majority says that, and it never actually happens.
So who ends up taking the hostages here? Do you think that there will be hostages taken, or we're going to get a clean debt limit increase?
I think we'll get a clean debt limit in the fall. We don't need to have that happen at the end of April. April will likely see a continuation of what we had in the budget last year, but with more money on the military, because again, Republicans were interested in cutting the sequestration cuts on military back when they didn't hold power. Now that they do, everybody wants to throw more money at the military.
Yeah, suddenly they
so we're
want
going to be spending more money under Trump than we did under Barack Obama, almost certainly.
And one correction to myself, the Democrats' brinksmanship is over the funding of the wall, I believe. I think that's one of their other must-not-haves for them to go along. All right.
Is the real story the surveillance, or what's going on in the investigation?
I think all of it needs to be examined. Obviously, if there was intentional disclosure of names of people who were in the Trump campaign, that has to be revealed. But the fact is that we know for a fact the Russians tried to change the outcome of our election, attacking the very fundamental of democracy. We know they did that. We need to know how. We need to know why. And most of all, we need to know what to do to prevent this kind of activity, which they continue to carry on in free nations around the world.
Senator John McCain tried to refocus the nation's attention on the issue at hand, Russia's interference in the 2016 election. Meanwhile, Trump took to Twitter this morning to decry surveillance and those leaking leakers, all caps. Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, ranking member of the CIA subcommittee of the House Intelligence Committee. Thank you so much for being here, Representative. So let's start back with what McCain had to say. He was asked to comment on the chairman of the committee on which you serve, Chairman Nunes. And this is a question as to whether Nunes is acting properly as House Intelligence Committee chair. Take a listen.
This is obviously a schism between Republican and Democrat, let alone the bizarre fashion with which all of this happened. If we're really going to get to the bottom of these things, it's got to be done in a bipartisan fashion. And as far as I could tell, Congressman Nunes killed that.
Do you think, Representative Swalwell, that Nunes is now a credible chairman for the committee, for the House Intelligence Committee?
He's not credible, Joy, on this investigation, and he should be as far away from it as possible. And to just go back, we had a very credible hearing, a very illuminating hearing with FBI Director Comey on Monday of last week. And then the very next day is where all of this really unraveled. And what I think happened, it's pretty clear. The facts were put forward to the American people that there is an investigation into the president's campaign as to the Russian interference. And so the White House sought to work with and use the chairman as a way to try and validate the president's wiretapping claims. And so the only way for us to get back on track and have a real independent, credible investigation that makes progress is for him to step aside.
Yeah, and the other option that we've heard talked about, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said it on this program, other people have floated the idea, is doing an independent commission, a 9/11 style commission that would take it out of either of the committees in the House or the Senate. This is Chris Wallace this morning on Fox interviewing Mitch McConnell on the Senate side as to what he thought of that idea. Take a listen.
Given all of the politics on all sides, the continuing controversy, why not appoint an independent 9/11 style commission or have the Justice Department appoint a special counsel so you have a truly nonpartisan, independent investigation that everybody can trust?
It's just not necessary based on what we know now. We've got a bipartisan investigation underway. It's called the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Burr and Senator Warner had a joint press conference this week. I think they clearly laid out that they're going wherever the facts take them. We don't need yet another investigation.
Sir, given the collapse of confidence in the House process, is the Senate Intelligence Committee good enough, or do you disagree with Mitch McConnell and think there needs to be an independent 9/11 style commission?
An independent commission is needed now more than ever, and Elijah Cummings and I wrote legislation back in December and reintroduced it in January to have an independent commission into Russia's interference. Every Democrat supports it. One Republican, Walter Jones, also supports it. And Joy, I wrote that legislation partially informed by my experience. I was a Capitol Hill intern when I was 20 years old when September 11th happened, and I saw how Democrats and Republicans united, came together, did an investigation in the House, but also allowed an independent commission to find out what happened and to make reforms so that we would never find ourselves vulnerable to an attack like that again. We need to do the same thing here, and I think it's not only the most comprehensive way now to find out just what happened, but it's an insurance policy against a compromised House investigation.
Yeah, and short of that, let's just say that that is not to be, and that there will still be House and Senate investigations going on. Do you think that one of the committees, right now the Senate has said they won't do it, but do you think the House committee should immunize General Michael Flynn, give him immunity in order to compel his testimony?
Right now, we don't know what he wants to be immunized from. When I was a prosecutor prior to going to Congress, anytime a witness asked for immunity, you would say, well, what do you have? What are you going to tell us that we can't get otherwise? And right now, we don't know why he wants to have immunity. I can tell you, Joy, generally, innocent people don't seek immunity, so I would also want to know if the Department of Justice is okay with this. But right now, General Flynn, we know that he was taking money from Russia's, essentially Russia's intelligence service, which they use Russia Today as a cutout to disseminate false information as a propaganda tool. And I think, at the very least, he should have known better than to do that. So I'm going to hold back until we know just exactly what he wants to give up.
Yeah, you agree with General Flynn on that question of whether or not a guilty, an innocent person seeks immunity. Let me listen to just a very interesting piece of sound. Vladimir Putin aide Dmitry Peskov was on with George Stephanopoulos this morning, and he was asked about what similarities there might be between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Just very interesting. Want to get your reaction. Take a listen.
You said that President Putin and President Trump are very much alike in their basic approach to international relations. How so?
They both insist on their priority as national interests. And they understand pretty well that sometimes it is in your national interest to conduct good relationship with your counterpart, ensuring that those relationships are mutually beneficial.
A lot of Trump supporters take that exact same view, interestingly enough, that Donald Trump's repeated contacts with Russia are actually a positive for the United States because it would allow us to work with what was an adversary. Do you concur with that?
No, Joy. And every time I start to wonder, am I chasing, ghosts here or going down the rabbit hole with this Russia investigation? I take a step back and I remind myself, we are talking about deep personal, political, and financial ties with a foreign adversary. This is not a case of people having such extensive ties to Germany or New Zealand or Mexico. I mean, this is a country that even post-Cold War continues to undermine us in Syria, continues to work against the interests of Ukraine. And we just learned a general said last week that they may be supplying arms to the Taliban, who are killing U.S. soldiers. So Russia's not our friend, and we should look, I think, with a healthy dose of skepticism at any person who has such ties with Russia as they're interfering with our elections.
Yeah, let alone the President of the United States. Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
I have a simple question. What the heck are you thinking? What is in your mind? Why would you want to give out any of your personal information to a faceless corporation for the sole purpose of them selling? Just last week, I bought underwear on the internet. Why should you know what size I take? Or the color? Or any of that information?
Congressman Mike Capuano expressed how so many people felt after congressional Republicans voted to roll back internet privacy protections that were set to take effect at the end of this year. The bill, which Donald Trump is expected to sign, leaves internet service providers free to sell your online data, like your browsing history, without your permission. And joining me now, MSNBC's chief legal correspondent, Ari Melber, and Federal Communications Commissioner, Mignon Clyburn. Thank you very much both for being here. And Commissioner Clyburn, I want to start with you on this. This was Congressman Steve Scalise on Tuesday on the House floor justifying this vote. Take a listen.
The internet was not broken and did not need the federal government to come in and try to fix it. The bottom line is that families expect and deserve to be protected online with a set of robust and uniform privacy protections. These rules simply do not live up to that standard.
Is that the case, Commissioner?
The public does expect to be protected, and the privacy protections that the FCC put into place harmonize its protections with what the FTC is doing and what the Consumer Privacy Bill of Rights has done. And so these rules that the public expects, they expect to have control over their personally identifiable information. The FCC sought that we put that in place back in October, and now we're on the cusp of all of that being eliminated, and the information, your most intimate information, including medical history, your browsing history, your Social Security numbers, that could be harvested and sold to the highest bidder. That is what is at risk.
And you know, Ari, I want to explain to people what this all means, but I first want to play Senator Jeff Flake, who's one of the sponsors of this bill, and he was arguing that that basically the rules that were being put in place unfairly advantaged companies like Yahoo and Facebook because it treated broadband companies differently. Let's listen to Jeff Flake.
Most of the data gathered is actually gathered by the so-called edge providers like Google or Facebook, and they aren't touched by any of the FCC regulations at all.
Can you explain all of that in layman's terms?
You want to get into this?
Yes.
Well, the FTC and the FCC have different legal mandates for different types of companies. So it is true broadly that there is some differential treatment, and if you were starting from scratch, you might want it to be uniform.
Right.
However, that is not really the best argument against having some privacy protections, and what this bill did was completely gut them. Think about the world we live in nowadays, right? You wouldn't say to someone, hey, come up in my home, rifle through my stuff, sell the information that you find. So maybe you don't take anything out of the underwear drawer, to use the congressman's example, but you write down information about it, and then you leave, sell it, and I get nothing. Yeah. Nobody would make that deal. And yet for most people, and especially young people, the most important stuff you have is probably digital. The most personal stuff you have about who you talk to, what you shop, how you book your WebMD, all this stuff is inherently digital because of the way we live our lives. So the notion that this Congress is trying to gut what was done in the Obama era and make it easier to, as I'm saying, rifle through that digitally, sell it, and what do you get? You get nothing. Yeah. So it's not like a deal. It's not really a deal. No. It's really weird. So, yes, I think if you were starting from scratch, you might harmonize FTC, FCC, and other legal mumbo-jumbo. But the core point here is this doesn't look like a thing that anyone would do for consumers or citizens. Yeah. It looks like, and I'm saying this as legally fairly as I can, it looks like a thing you would do only for corporations. To
make money on your data, basically. And, Commissioner, what is the justification of your new chairman, who is for this change? How do your fellow commissioners on the other side of this issue justify doing what Ari Melber just said, essentially allowing people to rifle through your personal data and sell it?
They are claiming that we have not harmonized the rules with the FTC and other privacy-oriented entities, and that is simply not true. What I take issue with Congressman Flake, what he said is that your internet service provider has 100% knowledge over what you do, how you access the internet, what device you use. edge providers, those like Google and Facebook, they only have a snapshot of what you do. But your internet service provider knows everything about you. They know where you are when you are online, when you access the internet. They know what device you use. They know what websites that you visit. And all of that information lets them into our lives. And if they have access to that information and more about every single digital footprint, everything we do online, everything we search, they can monitor and harvest that information and sell it to third parties. And we are at extreme danger. What if they were to sell that to your insurance company? Then if they knew that I was checking online at McDonald's, then my insurance rates might go up because they might know that I'm not necessarily compliant with my diet. Right. Now, that might sound a little, far-fetched. It totally is not. What if they were to sell that to your employer and they have access to some information that you might not want them? That can harm you in terms of your economic standing. So having access to that information, all of that information online, our history, and especially when we're talking about the Internet of Things, when you can literally look into my refrigerator and see what I'm doing, that is going to let people in your lives and do what they will with that information.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of people who are saying, okay, well, then we want to buy Congress's browser history. Slade has said you probably can't do it. But, I mean, why can't we have their information then? They work for us, the Congress.
Right. This has been a fascinating thing, and there would be laws against trying to individually sort of target or shame people, so it's important as you note that. But, yeah, folks online on Twitter, and someone was suggesting a fundraising for it, the idea of, well, if this is such a good idea, what if you went up in everybody's browser history? I mean, I think to the commissioner's point, my Big Mac, my business, I don't think it's anyone's business unless you really want to sell it yourself.
I want to get to, before we go, and thank you guys, you have a great news special coming up, and I want to first of all thank Minion Clyburn, the commissioner. We really appreciate it. But tonight on The Point, your great news show, Ari,
thank you.
Growing Up Trump. Explain it really quickly.
Well, you know, DMX said, I've been rapping 20 years, you're just 20 years old, and that was his point, that some people are too young to be, you know, up in the game. But we are actually flipping that on its head. We want to hear from young people. We're talking to folks who are 20-something in the resistance, new activists, and people who are pro-Trump who are 20-something.
So you're going to have basically a live focus group of Trump supporters and Trump resistors. That is going to be tonight at 5 p.m. It's going to be fascinating. The Point. This has become must-see TV, and we really, I love you coming up here on AM Joy as well. So we have like a tag team going.
Friday, that General Flynn failed to report the money that he received from that RT propaganda arm of the Kremlin, as well as 2 other Russian entities.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. That was Representative Adam Schiff of the House Intelligence Panel earlier today on the new revelations, again, about Michael Flynn and his ties to Russia. This time, financial filings that show payments to Flynn from Russia-linked entities that he had previously failed to disclose. The new filings are part of a Friday White House document dump detailing the financial holdings of top administration officials. In the form that Flynn first submitted to ethics officials in February, he failed to disclose a paid speech that he gave in Moscow, as well as income that he received from Russian-affiliated companies. Flynn added the details of those payments to a second amended version of that form that he signed on Friday. And joining me now is House Intelligence Committee member Illinois Congressman Mike Quigley. And Congressman Quigley, let's start with that amended filing. Why is it that Michael Flynn, who is now out of government, had to file an amended disclosure form about his finances?
Well, regardless, it still goes to the original filing. He has to be truthful in that. I don't know the particular rules and ethics requirements, but just because you leave government doesn't mean the requirements still weren't there in the first place and don't stand with you as time goes on. We now understand a little bit more about why the general was seeking immunity.
And let's go into just a little bit more about what was known about Michael Flynn at the time that he was hired to be Donald Trump's national security advisor. We know that there were concerns about him that were raised by the acting attorney general at the time, Sally Yates, who we were hoping was going to testify before the committee that you're a member of. The Guardian is reporting some new information that in addition to the payments he received from RT, payments for speeches in Moscow, doing some work for the government of Turkey, there were also some contacts potentially with a person who is affiliated, I guess, with the Russian GRU. One of the concerns involved an encounter with a Russian British graduate student named Svetlana Lakova, whom Flynn met on a trip to Cambridge in February 2014. He invited her to accompany him on his next official trip to Moscow with help to help with simultaneous translation. And The Guardian is saying that Flynn and Lakova remained in email contact conducted through an unclassified channel. And in one of those emails, he refers to himself as General Misha, etc. Have you heard anything about those potential contacts with somebody? She's a dual Russian national who may also be linked to Russian intelligence.
Let me tell you, what I was first concerned about was the fact that General Flynn had been fired by a previous administration for just these kind of problems. Some of the nuance that you're going into is work that the committee is investigating right now, the documents we're looking at, and as we go forward, people that we interview. So it's difficult for me to remember which field comes from what was open source and closed source, but I'll just tell you that unfortunately General Flynn is fertile ground for investigating Russian influence into the democratic process. We're going to take our time. We're not going to prejudge. But I assure you, when I was asked, who do you want to testify first, who would help you understand most if they testified fully and completely, and General Flynn was my first guest.
And on the question of his testimony, the ranking member of your committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, earlier on CNN expressed skepticism that he would allow Flynn to do so with immunity from the House Intelligence Committee. Let's let you listen to that.
The skepticism is, we'll need to consult with the Justice Department. They obviously have a lot of equities here. We don't want to do anything that will interfere in any case that the Justice Department may decide to bring. We also have to determine whether he really can add value to our investigation, whether we need him to learn information we can't learn from other sources.
And sir, the Senate Intelligence Committee has already indicated that they are not open to the idea at this time of giving Michael Flynn immunity to testify. To your knowledge, is the House more open to that idea?
Oh, I don't think so. I think Ranking Member Schiff raised an important point there. We would need what we call proffer. What is it exactly he anticipates to testify to? We would have to work with our Senate colleagues. We would have to work with the Justice Department to make sure that we're not stepping on their investigation, because that investigation, again, wouldn't necessarily involve just General Flynn, but everything in this investigation is tied to everything else. It's extraordinarily complicated, intertwined, so there's no rush to do this. I anticipate at some point in time General Flynn will be before us. I think at this time he probably recognizes it makes sense for him to come forward. We'll have to see.
And lastly, sir, do you have confidence in the chairman of your committee, Chairman Nunes?
I'll say this. Chairman Nunes ran an extraordinarily fair process through the first part of this term. The first 2 years under this chairman, I think he did a great job. It's been difficult, I think, obviously, under this president. I think he has conflicts internally. He can't serve two masters. We have to recognize, though, he's not stepping down. And the only other person that can make him step down is the Speaker of the House. He has said he won't do that. So we have to work together at this point. Chairman Nunes has to realize he can't serve two masters. He has to do this investigation impartially to maintain its credibility. Right. So we have to trust each other. We have to move forward. But we can't have any more midnight excursions. We can't have any more distractions. Yep. We can't cancel any more public hearings on this matter. So much of it is in the chairman's hands.
Yep. We will see if he follows your advice. Congressman Mike Quigley, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And joining me now is Tara Palmieri, White House correspondent for Politico, David Korn, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones, and Rosa Brooks, former Pentagon official. So let's jump right into it, and I'll go to you first, Tara. You heard Congressman Quigley say that the only person that can remove Chairman Nunes from his position is the Speaker of the House. He expressed some confidence. You've had Congresswoman Jackie Spears say absolutely not. She has now called on Nunes to step aside as chair. She has expressed a complete lack of confidence in him. From your reporting, does Nunes survive?
I think he will survive as long as there are there's no further reporting of more links between him and the White House. I think his credibility has been greatly damaged, and he needs to show that he's aggressive about this investigation, that he's not partisan and he's not carrying the water for the White House. But I mean, if Speaker Ryan, knowing what he knows about the fact that he went to the White House, retrieved information from White House officials, presented it as if it was independent information for a press conference that supported the president's claims that other intelligence officials have completely dismissed, and he still thinks he can stay on, I think that he would need to do. I know. Maybe there just needs to be more information of complicity with the White House. But for now, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the Speaker of the House decision, and he doesn't think that that's enough.
Yeah, David Corn is laughing at the idea of that kind of. Why are you laughing, David?
I'm not laughing at Tara, because I love Tara and her reporting. I'm laughing at the whole situation here. This investigation, I think, is shot. I think it's done. It's a dead parrot. It's not alive. It's not pining for the fjords. And I don't see how it gets back on trail. I mean, imagine what Nunes would have to do at this point to show his independence from Trump and the Republican Party and from the cover-up or the stonewall, the distraction that the White House has been trying to mount. He hasn't been able to do it. Every time he's had a chance in the last week and a half since this began, he's blown that opportunity. So I feel bad for Adam Schiff, because I think he would like to have the investigation move forward. But I think at this point, anything that Nunes does from here on in is 100% suspect. And I feel bad about that, because we need the Congressional Intelligence Committees to do effective oversight overall, and particularly on the Russian-Trump scandal.
Yeah, and I think, there have been other members of the House of Representatives who have expressed a lack of confidence. Jackie Spears is the first to come out and say Nunes should step aside. I want to play you guys what Ranking Member Adam Schiff, who is intrepidly trying to go forward with some credibility, at least as the ranking member. This is what he had to say, I think, about the central point here, which is the White House's own role in proffering that information to Nunes that he then turned around and proffered back to them. Here's Adam Schiff earlier on CNN.
First, the deputy assistant to the White House informed me when I went to see them that these are exactly the same materials that were shown to the chairman. Now, this is a very interesting point. How does the White House know that these are the same materials that were shown to the chairman if the White House wasn't aware what the chairman was being shown?
Rosa Brooks, your answer to that question.
I think never underestimate the role of stupidity, among other things here. I mean, that's what this is a story about. I think this is not necessarily a vast conspiracy, although you never know. It might turn out to be one. I think this is a bunch of overzealous NSC staffers thinking they're doing the president a favor. I think this is Nunes liking the cloak and dagger aspects of rushing off to the White House in the dark of night to view secret documents and then mouthing off about it. And now they're all trapped in this web they've created, which has more to do with stupidity. Yeah, I mean, the credibility of the House investigation at this point is absolutely shot. Luckily, that isn't the only investigation. On the Senate side, the Senate Intelligence Committee seems to be a somewhat more serious operation.
Yep, and to that very point, we interviewed Leader Pelosi yesterday. We aired that interview yesterday on this program, and she said precisely the same thing. Let's listen to Leader Pelosi talking about the Nunes investigation. Do you think he has credibility now as the leader of that investigation?
No, I think that he not only has lost all credibility, I think he's tarnished the office that he holds. He's brought discredit to something that is a very, very serious position in the Congress. We don't know what the conversation was with the Speaker, but if the guidance was go to the president and then go to the press, that was very wrong.
Pretty definitive. Tara, meanwhile, you're starting to see what at least looks like the movement of some people connected to Mike Flynn out of their positions. We've just learned that Katie McFarland will no longer be in her position. She's being offered a U.S. ambassadorship to Singapore. David is really enjoying these news items this morning. They're shipping her off to Singapore. So Tara first, and then giggly David.
Honestly, I had been hearing rumblings about KT being moved from her role since Mike Flynn was removed. That's why Dina Powell ended up getting the deputy position, which Politico reported on last month. And, it's a little suspect when you have a new boss who brings on a new deputy. You have two deputies. Who's the boss? And I'm not surprised to hear this. I've heard from NSC staffers internally that KT was considered to be a lightweight and seemed to be a little too politicized in some ways and not carrying her weight. right? So not surprised to hear about this. Have been hearing rumblings for a while. But yes, her connections to Flynn make her toxic. And that's
but
the
David
problem.
Corn, then why is it that Mr. Cohen-Watnick seems to be the only immovable object when it comes to people connected to Mike Flynn?
Well, first you have to ask yourself, what did the people of Singapore do to deserve this? I'm sorry, from half of America, we apologize, Singapore. This is what really is sad, Joy, that what's the #1 job of the U.S. government? That's to protect the American people. In the White House, who has that responsibility? The National Security Council, the National Security Advisory staff. And it's been a mess from the beginning. Donald Trump hired Flynn to do this job, and he didn't last more than a couple of weeks. There are people there, such as the folks who played around with Nunes on that midnight run, and they're still there. And it's not just that it was competence and they got caught up. It's been lying. Sean Spicer has been out there lying about what the NSC did and didn't do in this instance. And so the fact that they can't get the NSC and the National Security Advisor's office straight is really troubling.
And Rosa, is this what people worried about when they talked about the politicization of the NSC really by Mr. Bannon?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an internal war that I think is going on, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. And that war is between the grown-ups, and there are a few of them at the NSC. General H.R. McMaster came in after Flynn. He's a serious guy. He's not a partisan guy. Rumor has it that he has been trying his darndest to oust the people who are just campaign hacks and Trump loyalists who will lie through their teeth if that's what it takes. And he's had some success, and he's had some setbacks. He's obviously working against the Bannon wing, and we'll see how that turns out. And I think, as David says, the depressing thing is that this is not just some kind of reality show. This is actually America's national security that we're playing games with. So let's hope that the grown-ups prevail.
Yeah, we shall see. Nearly 500,000 people have signed a Change.org petition demanding that First Lady Melania Trump either move into the White House with her husband or reimburse taxpayers for the cost of providing security for her at Trump Tower. Although the petition claims the cost is exorbitant, it's hard to know exactly how much taxpayers are spending. The Secret Service's budget is not public, but the New York Police Commissioner recently said that it costs the NYPD up to $146,000 a day to protect the First Lady and the couple's son Barron at Trump Tower. The city is asking the federal government to reimburse those expenses. Meanwhile, the president is currently golfing at his club in Virginia, his 14th golf course trip in the 10 weeks since he's been president. Kristen, Yashar, Michelle, and Fernand Amandi are back with us, and Fernand is actually joining us for the first time today. So I'm going to first come to you, though, Kristen, on just the hypocrisy of the golf. Donald Trump was tweeting madly when President Obama was in office, saying, "When will Obama go on the next vacation if he wins the election?" The day after, "Our wonderful president was out playing golf all day. The TSA is falling apart. President Barack Obama's vacation is costing taxpayers millions." I mean, on and on and on. And now he's golfing every weekend.
It is a little bit difficult to stomach, especially, and Democrats did this with George W. Bush, and, so this is a political tactic. But I think that for his image, right, because everything that's going on right now with the Russia investigations, with his legislative policy agenda, he should be looking, okay, how does this look to the American people, especially so many of those who are, are not of, high, weren't wealthy, right, that voted for him. So it would be better for him strategically to be back in the White House and to show that he's really driving policy and serious about this if he's concerned about his image.
And Michelle Bernard, you look at the calendar that shows the weekends that he's been at Mar-A-Lago, the third, all the way through February, all the way through March. I think Trump's core base doesn't care what he does. He could, essentially do whatever he wants. He said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. I believe that is true. But there are still Republicans who ran for office, or there are still Republicans who live in districts that Hillary Clinton either carried or came close to carrying. And there are independents. Independents exist, and some of them voted for Donald Trump. How does this make him look to them?
I think they really have quite a quandary on their hands when it comes to Donald Trump and the money that they are spending that we as citizens are spending to keep him secure as he travels around the country to play golf. It's kind of funny, that there's that saying, "What's good for the goose is good for the gander." These were all the things that they complained about President Obama and, frankly, about other presidents. It's a fair complaint, I believe, when it comes to the president. I don't think that the country can do anything about it, and what we we really need to be focused on, quite frankly, is the budget and what, where money is, where they're proposing budget cuts, and that sort of thing. When it comes to Melania Trump, I got to tell you, I really believe that it is inherently anti-feminist and anti-woman for anyone to believe that they should dictate how she decides what is best for her life and what is best for her son. Maybe the public complaints will get the Trumps to cough up some money when it comes to, security that the city is spending on taking care of her. But she fully has a right to decide where she wants to live and what is best for her life and how she's going to conduct herself as the First Lady. It's no one's business, just like it was no one's business when it came to Michelle Obama's decision to bare her arms or wear shorts or, focus on childhood obesity and eating healthy.
Well, let's get into that a little bit, because Fernand, we've talked about this before, the idea that, the First Lady of the United States is essentially is refusing to live in the White House. But not only that, but her husband's travel is costing not just New York. We talk about New York a lot, but you're down there in Florida. Just MAR-A-LAGO at all. We talked about the budget. Politico's estimated, based on the General Accounting Office, based on reporting on a similar Obama trip, every trip that he takes to Mar-a-Lago costs $3 million. That Florida has to pony up a lot of that. Palm Beach itself, from a New York Times report, $200,000 in lost fuel sales at a local airport because they can't use it. 75 no-shows at a restaurant in just one night. $60,000 a day in overtime. 250 private flights. So, you have the right of the Trumps to live the lifestyle they want, and then you have the cost these communities have to bear.
Well, first and foremost, Joy, let's not blame the First Lady, because would you want to live with Donald Trump in the White House and be stuck with him? I certainly wouldn't. But look, the fact of the matter is the predatory payday loan presidency of Donald Trump continues. And just like in any good con, and just like in the payday loan industry, lots of promises of easy money, convenience, and happy talk until the sticker shock kicks in and the fine print kicks in. And it's in this case, no different, Joy, as you point out. Let's look at the numbers, because the numbers are rather compelling, in my opinion. $150,000 nearly a day, which translates to about $50 million a year, just to keep Melania at Trump Tower at taxpayer expense. And then these golf trips, the gall of these billionaires and millionaires who like to brag about how much money they have, yet the public has to foot the bill for their travel. We've got nearly 6 trips. We're not even 2.5 months into this presidency, hitting on the $20 million mark. Yet at the same point in his presidency, how many trips did Barack Obama take? 0. And Donald Trump has the stones to say that Obama needed to get off the golf course. Joy, it's just the con of a presidency. It goes on and on and on.
And to the point, Michelle makes the point that we shouldn't criticize the First Lady for where she wants to live. However, the choices she's making do impact the taxpayer, right? Michelle Obama did Let's Move, but she raised money from private entities like Walmart and Nike to get behind that program. The Secret Service has put in a request for an additional $60 million just for next year alone. $28.6 million of that is just to protect Melania and her son at Trump Tower. Yeah. Is there a fairness issue here, and should the Trumps reimburse maybe the taxpayer for these costs?
I think it gets difficult when you ask someone to reimburse, because the only 2 people that are required to have Secret Service protection are the president and vice president. Sure. It would be a national security nightmare if a grandchild or a child or, the son-in-law of the president was kidnapped or injured or hurt in any way. There should be no concern on the federal side with respect to budget. There should be concern as far as the Trumps are concerned, to be mindful of what they do and don't do. One of the things that Michelle Obama got a lot of flack for was her foreign travel. Well, it turns out at the end of the term, she did less foreign travel than Hillary Clinton and Laura Bush. And she was mindful of those costs. And the Trump should be mindful as well. Does he need to go to Mar-a-Lago every weekend? Absolutely not. Yeah. Does she need to take a separate plane down to Mar-a-Lago as opposed to meeting him in Washington and taking Air Force One, which is already moving down there? Right. Yes. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things they have to be careful about.
What do you make of this argument that is sort of, there's the 2 separate things. There's the Trump loving to go to golf every weekend and the optics of that and the cost of it, and then there's the Melania living situation. Your thoughts?
Right. I tend to agree that, Melania Trump, I agree with Michelle, has the ability to do whatever she needs to do. Now, I live in New York City. I live just around the corner from Trump Tower, so I would agree that for my convenience sake, that it would be great for her to live down there. But I think that the American people really want them to just focus on getting things done, right? Everyone can scream politics. This is what we do. We talk about the fact that they're golfing, and, you know, Republicans were so critical of Michelle Obama and Barack Obama for playing golf. It's like, let's trim the fat here. Let's talk about stuff that actually matters, because it's those kinds of conversations and complaints, honestly, that make Americans tune out. They get apathetic about politics. They don't vote, and they have this just animosity toward Washington, instead of saying, okay, how can we work with our government? Let's call our senators. Let's feel like we have an efficacy to affect our lawmakers.
But Michelle, at the same time, there is a let them eat cake sort of aspect to this. I mean, this is a family that lives in a literal golden tower, and that is asking for our sympathy because they don't want to all have to be forced to live in the 240-year-old house. I mean, there is an aspect of it that it seems unfair that the taxpayers should have to pay for their lifestyle. I mean, even if you want to feel badly for the situation that she has of wanting to keep her son here, we're paying for this.
Well, you know, the argument that I would make to the Trumps, like if I were an advisor to Melania Trump, one of the things I would do is say, go back in history and just look at what other first ladies have done in order to deal with these type of issues. Jackie Onassis, she went out and she raised monies privately to be able to do all of the renovations that she wanted to do to the White House. There has to be a way, given all of Donald Trump's allegations about his wealth, assuming that it's there, to be able to deal with this and reimburse the taxpayers in New York for the security of his wife and of his son. My only point is simply that no one has the right to tell Melania Trump that they know better than she does where she should live or how she should raise her son. All of the issues around, you know, the fiscal appropriateness of this, I absolutely agree with, but I think that there is a way for the Trumps to be able to take care of this, and if Donald Trump were smart, he would do so. All of the allegations that he constantly made about Barack Obama are going to be thrown back in his face, and when it comes re-election time, if he makes it to, you know, through the following 4 years, he's going to have to contend with how he spent the nation's money.
Yeah, and Fernand, is there any, you know, Donald Trump won Florida, but is there any discontent at this point with the amount of money they are spending just on their lifestyle?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, there is a contempt for the process, a contempt for the people in this flagrant disregard. You know, again, on one side of his mouth, he talks about saving the American taxpayer money and the efficiencies and all the winning he's going to bring. But the truth of the matter is, it is a massive inconvenience. The people of Palm Beach County alone are already talking about not only the costs involved, but the quality of life issues. And let me get back to the fundamentals on this. This is a conscientious decision made by the president and the First Lady. I take exception with some of the comments on the panel. These are people that know what they're doing, they know the implications, and they do it anyway because they don't care. I find that contemptuous of the American people and the American taxpayer.
Yeah, and we just had these financial disclosure forms, Ishar, that show that Ivanka and Jared, the son and daughter, the daughter and the son-in-law, they're beneficiaries of about $740 million in real estate investments. You have the other sons traveling on business with taxpayer-funded security. This family is living quite well on the taxpayer dime, and Donald Trump still has not made a commitment to not take his salary. He said he was going to donate it back. We have no sign he's going to do that.
Yeah, and he asked the press corps for, I don't know if you remember that, for advice on where they should donate.
Where should it go? He should ask April Ryan. Apparently he asks her for all the advice.
So, you know, this goes back to the mindfulness issue. You know, the Trump sons have a right to be in business. They have a right to go do business, but they should be mindful of their travel if they're going to travel with the Secret Service, because there's advanced teams, lots of expensive hotels, they're not staying in cheap places, and it costs the taxpayers a lot of money. By the way, there's an easy way to sort of calm this down politically for the White House. Admit that they were wrong, which they're never going to do. But any other administration would say, you know what, President Trump, you don't know what the job is like until you're in it. And now he recognizes why you need to go play golf and why you need to get out of the White House. By the way, every president should go play golf. Thank God. It calms them down.
And by the way, Camp David running empty. I think you might have tweeted this.
$8 million a year.
So he ain't using it. All right.
He ain't using it.
Thank you very much, Kristen Haglund. Welcome to the show. New friend of the show. Yashar Ali, Michelle Bernard, and Fernand Amandi, longtime friends of the show. All right. Thank you guys all.
A state of emergency declared in Atlanta after a massive rush hour fire Thursday caused this bridge on I-85 to collapse.
It's frightening and insane. Thank goodness no one got hurt.
Traffic backed up for miles, a standstill overnight. The long-term impact crippling, closing schools and forcing drivers to find alternate routes this morning.
Big mess, a really big, huge mess.
It's going to take months for them to fix it, which it's going to take a lot of patience.
The collapse of Atlanta's I-85 bridge this week put America's infrastructure back in the headlines. The reasons for the fire and the subsequent collapse are still under investigation, but the American Society of Civil Engineers has found that 23% of our bridges are either unsound or functionally obsolete. Donald Trump has said he wants to invest in infrastructure, but he has yet to lay out a plan. In the meantime, actress and comedian Yvette Nicole Brown is doing her part to make sure Americans realize how dangerous this problem is.
Once upon a time, Americans built the greatest public works project in history, the Interstate Highway System. Over 46,000 miles of roadway that connect us and bring us the things we depend on every day. Those roads absolutely changed our lives, and we're absolutely wearing them out. The highway system designed 60 years ago was never meant to handle the number of vehicles it does today. Think about it as if the highways are your favorite pair of jeans. Old, a bit worn, but you can't bear to park with them. Our real problem is we gain weight. We can just barely squeeze into our jeans.
And joining me now is Yvette Nicole Brown, producer and narrator of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop. And she's also the host of Sci-Fi's reality show Cosplay Melee. And of course, back with me is the Washington Post Jonathan Capehart, who's also always my co-host, so we always have him along as well. And of course, you know Yvette Nicole Brown from Community, those of you who are just tuning in. So, Ms. Yvette Nicole Brown, this is a really fascinating documentary, by the way. Congratulations on doing it. Some of the information in it, I think people understand. They drive over a bridge that's not in great shape. But some of the information was actually frightening. The ASCE, which gives a report card to infrastructure, has given an overall rate of D+ to America's infrastructure, poor, at risk, mostly below standard, with elements approaching the end of their service life, the conditioning capacity, serious concern, strong risk of failure, on and on and on. Our infrastructure, our roads are literally crumbling under us.
That's true. And when you think about it, a D+, would you eat at a restaurant that had a D+? Most of us would not, but every single day we're driving on roads that have that rating. And I think it's just that people don't know. And so we hope that Be Prepared to Stop kind of introduces people to infrastructure if they don't know about it and tells them that we have to find a way to fix it. Our Highway Trust Fund hasn't been increased since 1993, which is ridiculous when you think about it. There's been no increase. So everyone's afraid of taxes and all those types of things, but if it keeps the road safe for your baby to be in a school bus, it's worth it. And if it helps you, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, finish your sentence. Finish your sentence.
Oh, I was saying, and it also helps you get your things. Like, people forget that trucks bring everything. Everything in this room I'm sitting in came off a truck. And if the roads don't work, you can't get your stuff. So think about it from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me play the trailer just so you guys can see one more little clip of the film because it really makes that point that literally everything you have is trucked to you. Take a look.
Yes.
The bridges are old and just falling apart.
200 million times a day, motorists in the United States are driving over structurally deficient bridges in urban areas.
Most people do not realize that every tangible object, every piece of food they consume was most likely in a truck before it got to them.
Our only hope is for the American public to come to grips with the reality that we are 28th in the world on infrastructure investment.
And even one of the things you guys did is you talked about what would happen if 5 days without a truck being able to get to you. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny. One of my favorite shows is The Walking Dead, and actually by the 5th day, we're pretty much ready for a zombie apocalypse at this point. You know, you don't have medicine. There's no milk or food in the stores. ATMs are empty. Banks are shut down. Like, it becomes literally a crisis across the world if you don't have trucks. So I think that when people watch the documentary, they'll see that this is something that greatly impacts them personally. It's the whole, just in the same way healthcare kind of got everybody up because it was like, well, it's my pills, it's my cancer, this is our road. And it's the street that you drive on. So we're trying to give it a personal bent so people can see it through their own eyes, and then maybe we can go to some town halls and start talking about, these potholes and these bridges, so it's a very personal issue.
And Jonathan, the reason that it isn't changing is because of this fear of raising taxes. Is there any will in Washington to do the basic thing that has to get done here, which is to raise taxes to fix these roads and bridges?
And the short answer is no, and I'm so glad Yvette brought that up in her response to you at the beginning of this segment. that the Highway Trust Fund hasn't been raised, correct me if I'm wrong, Yvette, since 1993.
1993.
And the tax money that goes into that fund is what keeps the roads and bridges in repair. And what I'm trying to figure out, and maybe Yvette, you know this, is how do we bridge the gap between members of Congress here in Washington who need to raise taxes in order to refill the trust fund and the American people?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, go on.
Yeah. We have to find a way to make people understand that this affects them. We're very reactionary instead of proactive. Like the bridge in Atlanta, we have to get that built back up. So everyone's scrambling to do that. But if we prepare the bridges and take care of them before they crumble, we would be in a better position. So we have to get people to understand that this is a crisis right now. This is not a crisis for next year or 10 years from now. We're in trouble right now. Our roads and bridges are in trouble right now. So it's things like this and time like this, Joy, that you're giving me that gets the word out.
Absolutely. The documentary is Be Prepared to Stop. It is phenomenal. I hope that everyone will tune in and watch it. And Yvette, with Nicole Brown, we happen to love the same show.
Yes,
so I know that we'll be watching Walking Dead tonight, the finale.
Finale tonight, yes.
And I'll see you on Talking Dead the next time you're on. You're really great.
Yes,
Thank
honey.
you.
Nice to meet you. Bye, Jonathan.
Bye. Great to meet you, too. Thank you to Yvette Nicole Brown and Jonathan Capehart. And Yvette's documentary, Be Prepared to Stop, will be available on Amazon on April 6th and on iTunes later in the month. Please check it out. BePreparedToStop.org is where you can get more deets. That is our show for today. Be sure to join us next week for more AM Joy. Keep it on MSNBC for the rest of your Sunday.